New, a new roadmap for campus dialogue, the Five Pillars Framework. My name is Caroline Mell, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Constructive Dialogue Institute. Today's webinar is going to focus on exploring effective strategies for building a campus culture of inquiry and dialogue. I'm going to begin by sharing a framework that we've developed at CDI on how to really infuse inquiry and dialogue into your institutional culture. Then I'm going to open up a discussion with two nationally recognized leaders in the field, Dr. Jeremy Haefner, the Chancellor of the University of Denver, and Rachel Stephenson, the Chief Transformation Officer of the City University of New York. We'll then make time for the audience to share your own questions with a Q&A. Before we get really started, and as we wait for everyone to start arriving, I just wanted to begin with a quick poll that we're going to open up. So if you could just take a moment to respond, the question is, how would you describe your institution's current approach to constructive dialogue? We'll just take a moment to see the responses. So it seems like about 50% of participants say that they're somewhere in between having some really robust strategic approach and having ad hoc programming. About 40% say ad hoc programming, and only about 13% say a strategic comprehensive strategy. This aligns with what we're seeing in the field, and our hope for today is to really help provide you all with practical strategies so that you can start shifting from this more ad hoc programming more and more towards a comprehensive, intentional strategy that really moves the needle. So thank you for sharing. So to begin, as most of you know, CDI is a nonpartisan nonprofit, and we partner with colleges and universities across the country to build cultures of inquiry and dialogue. So I wanted to begin by first defining what do we mean by a culture of inquiry and dialogue. So we define a culture of inquiry and dialogue as a culture in which curiosity drives exploration, where multiple perspectives deepen understanding, and where dialogue balances rigor with generosity. Within this culture, we see lively intellectual exchanges, challenging assumptions, sparking discovery, and turning disagreement into a catalyst for growth and learning. We also believe that a culture of inquiry and dialogue should center a core set of values. And the values that we prioritize are pluralism, open inquiry, free expression, constructive dialogue, and trust. Now, in our work, in the past year, we have recognized that there is a real gap in the field. In the past years, especially, we've noticed that many universities are really deeply engaging in this work. They are making serious investments to promote inquiry and dialogue on their campuses. But nevertheless, what we've found is that many campuses are struggling with how to do so in a truly effective, strategic manner. What we're often hearing from people is that they have a lot of programming, but the programming is kind of happening in a sporadic fashion. There are different pockets popping up across campus. It's not coordinated. And as a result, you have these one-off great events and trainings and workshops and initiatives, but they're not connected to one another to actually truly make a change at the cultural level and lead to durable, meaningful change. And when you take a step back, it makes sense that this is a gap because this work is really hard and there's no standard playbook for it. And so we at CDI thought, well, what if we could build a playbook to actually help campuses think about this work more strategically? So, over the past year, we have distilled our lessons learned from a decade in this work, from working with more than 150 campuses across the country, from best practices in behavior change research, culture change literature. And based on all of that research, we've since synthesized it into a framework that we call the five pillars of a culture of inquiry and dialogue. And so the five pillars are a leadership commitment to this work, infusing it into curriculum and pedagogy, ensuring that it's part of the co-curricular experience, ensuring that policies, processes, and structures are aligned with this, and also having in place a strong infrastructure around measurement and organizational learning. And so the idea is that if you truly want to embed inquiry and dialogue into your institutional DNA, you really need to be working across these five different pillars. And our intention also, hearing this list, none of these should surprise you. These should feel intuitive. And that was by intention, by design, that we're really trying to think about the fundamental components of a campus experience and thinking about what are strategic ways to comprehensively embed this into the campus experience. So I'm going to go through one by one and talk a little bit more about what each of these pillars actually looks like in action. So, the first pillar, leadership commitment, is really about leadership, presidents, trustees, senior leaders making a visible commitment to constructive dialogue, ensuring that it's an institutional priority through their statements, their actions, their decisions, their investments. And so this is something that again and again in our work we've heard is really a necessity, that it's really hard to make meaningful change on campus if it's not clearly a priority coming from leadership. And once leaders make a visible commitment, it really encourages others to get involved because they recognize, this is staying power, this is legitimacy at this institution. So I just want to briefly review a few strategies for this specific pillar. So the first is that leaders can make a public commitment. They can make public statements about their commitment to this work. The second is that this can be embedded into mission statements and institutional strategic plans. The third is that leaders can actively model this in the way that they engage with other members of their community. And the last piece is that leaders can demonstrate a commitment through infrastructure and resources. They can allocate staff time, budget lines, recognition systems that sustain this work in a meaningful way. The second pillar is curriculum and pedagogy. So, as we all know, the whole purpose of a university is the classroom experience. And so we envision academic life really preparing students to think independently and with nuance, and to be able to participate in dialogue across ideological divides and consider multiple perspectives. This is the pillar that most frequently people say is really challenging to accomplish at scale. We wanted to share a few core strategies for how to do this work. So the first is curriculum requirements. You could be intentional about ensuring that dialogue curriculum is embedded into core requirements like the Gen Ed curriculum or core curriculum. The second piece is around curriculum design. So there is the opportunity to be intentional that any course, it doesn't need to be a dialogue focused course, a course on, politics or polarization. Any course can be very intentional about designing the syllabus such that you're ensuring that students are engaging with a diversity of perspectives on various issues. And then the third piece is around faculty development and pedagogy. So, what we often hear is that faculty are really struggling because they haven't been trained to be able to navigate these really contentious conversations about highly sensitive issues. So, really investing in faculty to be able to give them the confidence and skills they need to establish norms in the classroom that allow for people to share openly, to have the confidence to facilitate these types of conversations, and to encourage students to really question their assumptions and engage in these types of conversations. The third pillar is the co-curricular experience. So really recognizing the opportunity to build in opportunities for engaging in dialogue across lines of difference across the co-curricular experience, including building relationships across differences and giving students the opportunity to practice the skills of open, respectful dialogue. So there are a few core strategies that we've identified. So the first is co-curricular engagement. So really thinking about from orientation to graduation, what are the different touch points where you can infuse dialogue and dialogue skills and opportunities and relationship building across lines of difference. So things like orientation, residence life, how do you really intentionally build cross-cutting relationships between students? The second strategy is student leadership. So thinking about opportunities to train RAs, peer mentors, student government leaders, so that they have the skills to navigate difficult conversations with their peers on a day-to-day basis and actually model these types of skills in action. The third strategy is around investing in staff and administrator development. So, recognizing that a lot of staff are really at the front lines of encountering really challenging dynamics and conflicts that emerge between students and student groups. So, ensuring that staff and administrators have the skills they need to make space for these types of conversations, that they know how to mediate conflicts when they arise, that they are modeling this type of behavior in their day-to-day work and interactions with students. And then the fourth strategy is around social norms and cultural reinforcement. So just recognizing that policies alone won't change culture. And there's a lot that institutions can do to establish clear expectations and norms about what it means to be part of the university, what it looks like to interact here, how students are expected to show up, how they're expected to navigate differences in conflict, and then reinforcing those norms through traditions and messaging. So it really becomes part of the culture. The fourth pillar is policies, processes, and structures. So you can kind of think about this as kind of the general operating system of the university. If these pieces are misaligned from your overall objectives, if you just focus on programming, it's very unlikely that you'll see a meaningful change in your culture in the long run. So there are a few key strategies for this particular pillar. The first is around policies and procedures. So, really ensuring that your policy and procedures are aligned with this type of culture of inquiry and dialogue. So, one thing that we saw, for example, at a large national level is that prior to October 7th, many campuses hadn't revisited or reviewed their speech policies in a long time. And many campuses didn't have time, place, and manner restrictions that were clearly articulated. And not only were they not clearly articulated, but they also weren't really socialized on campus. So there's a lack of clarity around expectations. So ensuring that your policies and procedures are actually aligned with the outcomes that you're hoping to see. And again, that they're not just policies that live on a website. There's something that students are aware of. They understand the consequences of not abiding by those policies. Those things are really critically important. And then also ensuring that you are enforcing those policies consistently. The second strategy is around deliberative processes. So just recognizing that the processes or the ways in which universities come to decisions can either reinforce or contradict its stated values. So when decision-making processes include real input from students, faculty, and staff, people experience dialogue as part of how the campus actually works, not just, rhetoric on a website. And so again, really thinking about how are the processes that we as an institution are operating under, are they aligned or misaligned with these stated objectives? And then the third piece is around cross-functional collaboration. So again, as I mentioned, one of the core challenges that we hear with our partners is that there is a lot of great work that might be happening on your campus, but it's totally fragmented. So there might be some great program in this, graduate school over here, this professor leading this incredible program over there, but they're not coordinated, they're not interacting with one another, they're not learning from one another. So building intentional structures that actually knit these different pieces together so that again they actually add up to truly rise to the level of culture change. And then finally, the fifth pillar is around measurement and organizational learning. So ensuring that as an institution, you are establishing clear goals and metrics for the outcomes that you're seeking to achieve, and that you're using that to evaluate your progress along the way. So there are a few key strategies in this pillar that I'll review briefly. So the first is, again, goal setting and metrics. This is something that we're hearing a lot that campuses are struggling with, but really getting clear on what are you trying to accomplish? What does change look like? What does this culture look like to you? What do you hope that students will be able to demonstrate? What skills are you looking for? What competencies? So getting really clear on those definitions and the ways in which you plan to actually measure whether or not you're on track. The second piece is really, again, ensuring that you have a mechanism for that evaluation, capturing that data, reflecting on that data. And the third is what are you doing with the data? Really ensuring that that data is actually being used to inform organizational decision making so that you can understand what should be scaled up, what needs to be adapted, where do you have gaps, so that you're not just taking shots at the dark in the dark. You're really operating in a data informed way to truly make progress on this very challenging topic. So again, those are the five pillars that we have identified that are really critical for truly embedding and weaving dialogue and inquiry into the institutional fabric of your institution. What we also have found is that as institutions are really thinking about their next steps, thinking about their strategies, just simply having this type of framework um, as a kind of roadmap of thinking about, how am I organizing our different investments or different programming? Even just doing an exercise with your colleagues, thinking about doing an inventory mapping of what do we do today? How does it fit across the five pillars? Where are we really strong? Where do we have gaps? Where should we be investing more? Where should we, not bother investing another incremental dollar because actually we're doing really great here? Those types of conversations can be really clarifying in helping you decide how you can use your limited resources most effectively to truly drive change on this topic. And so now that I've shared a little bit about this framework at a high level, I'm excited that we have two leaders in the field who have really demonstrated this work in action, who are going to be joining us to talk very specifically about their experiences. So I'm honored to be joined by our two panelists today, Dr. Jeremy Haefner, the Chancellor of the University of Denver, and Rachel Stephenson, the Chief Transformation Officer of the City University of New York. So Dr. Jeremy Haefner is, as I mentioned, the University of Denver's Chancellor and has more than 3 decades of higher education leadership experience. At DU, he implemented the 4D experience, a holistic approach to education that integrates intellectual growth, well-being, character development, and career readiness. He believes higher education must prepare students for meaningful participation in democratic society and is deeply committed to free expression and pluralism, helping to position DU as a place where diverse perspectives are welcome and civil discourse flourishes. A mathematician by training, his research focuses on integral representation and module theory, and he earned a BA in mathematics from the University of Iowa and a PhD and MA in mathematics from the University of Wisconsin. Rachel Stephenson is CUNY's inaugural Chief Transformation Officer, leading the Office of Transformation, which drives complex system-wide initiatives that advance the Chancellor's highest priorities across the university's 26 colleges. Since its launch in 2022, the office has led efforts including Career Success Fellows, the Constructive Dialogue Initiative, CUNY Cares in the Bronx, and a reimagined university performance management process. Previously, Rachel served as Assistant Vice Chancellor for Academic Strategy and Operations and Chief of Staff to the Executive Vice Chancellor and University Provost, where she helped advance major academic priorities. Early in her career at CUNY, she held leadership roles in strategic partnerships and founded multiple flagship programs, including CUNY Service Corps, the Dream.US Scholarship Program, and the Program for Dreamers at CUNY. A former educator and TEDx speaker, Rachel holds a BA in English from Trinity University and an MFA from Columbia University. Thank you so much for joining us today to share your wisdom and experience. So I wanted to begin with asking a question to each of you. We'll begin with Jeremy. If you could just tell us a little bit about why you decided to prioritize building a culture of inquiry and dialogue on your campus.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And thank you for inviting me. It's a delight to have this opportunity to talk about this really, really important issue here that we face on our colleges. Um, I guess I would start by simply saying the skills that you talked about, Caroline, the skills of inquiry, constructive dialogue, free expression, listening across differences, those are just simply critical to learning and to really immersing yourself in an academic environment. So if we didn't do this, I think we wouldn't be living up to our obligation. And secondly, these students are going to graduate and they are going to go out into our communities. They are going to be leaders, they're going to be contributors. They need these skills to succeed in life, not just in their work life, but even in their home life as well. But aside from those skills, there was a moment for me when I realized we really needed to double down on our focus. And that was in 2017. This will be familiar to many of those in the audience here at Middlebury College, where Speaker Charles Murray was violently shut down by student protesters. It really did turn pretty ugly with people getting hurt. And it was just a moment in my academic career where I realized that, my goodness, higher education is going off the rails, and that this behavior goes against the very principles of the purpose of universities and why they exist, which is to educate our students, to make sure our discovery of new knowledge is validated, to listen to all the evidence and theories, and to make our own critically informed decisions. So when I was inaugurated in 2021, I made this one of three planks to what I wanted to accomplish at the University of Denver, to really lean in on open inquiry, free expression, and pluralism. So that's why I'm so excited about this topic.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. And Rachel, I would love to hear from you.
Yes, and of course, thanks again for the opportunity to be here. You'll hear a lot of what Jeremy shared, echoed, and my response here. I mean, certainly, what we are describing here is at the heart of what higher education exists to do, right? I mean, we want a university that thrives when curiosity is driving exploration and when multiple perspectives ultimately become a catalyst for learning, right? Rather than something we try to avoid. Many probably know already that CUNY is the nation's largest urban public university. We've got 250,000 degree-seeking students, 26 colleges, and the members of our community represent every background, every identity, ideology, life experience that you can possibly imagine. We're really proud that CUNY is one of our that diversity is one of our greatest strengths. But this also means that we have to be really intentional about building the skills and the norms that allow people to navigate difference productively. I mean, the chancellor, who is my partner in this work, really cares about making sure that the community can thrive in these spaces. And I have to say, after making plenty of investments and work that was originally framed as part of our anti-hate initiative, we found that some of the most well-intentioned events would sometimes go a little sideways because when difficult conversations came up, members of our community, faculty, staff, and students got a little stuck. And so we realized that, and good intentions aren't enough. If we don't create the conditions for meaningful, respectful, and rigorous dialogue, then ultimately we're not preparing our students for the world they're entering, as Jeremy indicated. I just want to note that we decided to really dig in here. What we are doing at CUNY is a system-wide, multi-tiered strategy that includes leadership development and strategy planning for presidents and their senior teams, facilitator certification for student-facing staff, faculty and student leader training. We're doing scalable online learning through the Perspectives platform and evaluation to understand the campus climate shifts over time. So this really isn't a single program. We think of it as a cultural transformation strategy. And the last thing I say in response to this question is that, this doesn't mean things aren't going to happen, right? Inevitably, moments of crisis are going to emerge for all of us. And so, we want to make sure that the members of our communities have shared frameworks, shared values, and shared skills to carry them through these moments of difficulty. So we think about this work as supporting institutional resilience.
Thank you for sharing. And what's really remarkable about both of you as leaders and your institutions is really how deep your commitment has been to advancing this work. That, as you both alluded to, this is not just some kind of superficial project. Both of your institutions have become true national leaders in demonstrating what this can look like. So, again, really appreciate you sharing with us. And I'm going to structure our questions around some of the pillars to just give people, again, a deeper sense of what these pillars look like in action. So the next question I have is around the first pillar around leadership commitment. Because while we found that obviously a strong leadership commitment is essential, we also see that if initiatives feel too top down, they can still fail. And so I'm curious to hear, Jeremy, if you would want to go first, how you've balanced clear leadership direction with authentic engagement and ownership across your campus. You're still muted, sorry.
Sorry about that. This is very, very important because if you don't have the campus buy-in, particularly from faculty, your work is likely not to have the cultural changes that you really need. We work directly with faculty from step one. We started with a call of all faculty who really wanted to be a part of these efforts. And we gave initial funding to 3 faculty-led projects. We chose a limited number of projects at the start simply because we wanted to demonstrate our focus and commitment. And we wanted to demonstrate that you could make a difference in this space, that you could change people's minds about constructive dialogue. So the first one I want to talk about is what we call the Denver Dialogues. And this is offered by our Joseph Corbell School of Global and Public Affairs and the Scrivener Institute of Public Policy, which is part of the Corbell School. They have engaged 4 different think tanks, if you will, Hoover, AEI, New America, and Aspen Institute. And they bring scholars and thought leaders from these think tanks to engage in constructive conversation and debate on policy issues that are impacting the nation and the world. They bring them in kind of panel form, but there are also surrounding seminars that students can participate in to think about what these thought leaders have said and to break down arguments and to understand whether they feel compelled by what the panelists said. So some of the topics are the evolving dynamics of the Russia and Ukraine war, its repercussions for global security and democracy, an ongoing issue, of course, in our world. Another one was on the challenges of climate change and at the same time, democratic decline. Are they related? And if so, how might we look at those challenges? And then another fascinating one was the 2 of the most central promises of Project 2025. So you can imagine that this engaged wide swaths of our faculty, and it's ongoing. Every quarter we offer a dialogue like this. The second project I want to share with you is what we call debate across the curriculum. If you think about writing across the curriculum, this is debate across the curriculum. And we had DU professors collaborate with our on-campus experts on rhetoric. Some of these are faculty members who have been trained around debate. But what they do is they introduce non-competitive classroom debate in the classrooms that the professors allow them to come in. These are the topics of these debates are tied to the classroom theme or topic, if you will. The students are assigned viewpoints on which they must conduct thorough research before defending their stance to the class. And then they undergo kind of collaborative question and answer, and it's all facilitated by the experts in rhetoric there. It is fascinating. I want to talk a little bit more about this, but I'm going to go to my third project here, which is called Conflict Engagement and Resolution. And here, faculty have engaged graduate and undergraduate students to dive deep into a contemporary issue. They ask the graduate students to do evidence-based research on the topic. So, for example, one of the topics was on, of course, immigration. And the graduate students did research and really summarized four different strategies that have been discussed worldwide over the years. Then undergraduates are invited to kind of a informal pizza dinner. They break up into tables of approximately six each, and they're invited on the basis of the research that the graduate students have done to discuss the research and ultimately see if they can come to consensus and agreement on that. So it's not just let's engage around a dialogue. Let's see if we can also come to agreement on that. So all of these have really risen right out of the faculty interests and commitment to the topic. I'd say that we also have a student advisory board, so students who are passionate about this topic can help us shape what they'd like to see. And then later in the spring, we will be offering our fourth annual day of free expression celebration that we call Spark. And this is where we engage students and faculty to have discussions on freedom of expression and really talk about the importance and talk about the challenges that are implicit with these kinds of issues. So very, very bottom up at the end of the day, but we do have aspirations to think even bigger of how the University of Denver can take a leadership role across our country as a convener on this space.
Hmm.
Thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Those are wonderful examples. And, again, one of the key challenges that people often name is how do you get faculty engaged in this work? And so those are such great examples of really inviting faculty in to be partners in the design and seeing what remarkable outcomes that can lead to. So thank you. Rachel, would love to hear from you about how CUNY has approached this.
Yeah. Well, as a reminder, CUNY is a system of 26 colleges. And so, we recognized from day one that we could not be prescribing how this work needs to look across the system, but we wanted to build a framework and ultimately co-create the strategy with each of our 26 colleges. And of course, as you mentioned earlier, the first pillar of your framework emphasizes that yes, leaders should be elevating, should be modeling, right, making investments, et cetera. But we don't want to dictate a model. We certainly couldn't, in our context, dictate a model for 26 profoundly different campuses. We're thinking more about creating clarity, alignment, and support. So there are a few ways that we've done this that I figured might be helpful to share. First, we started to ground the work in shared values and the university's strategic roadmap. I mean, I'm a big storyteller. I think storytelling is key to any successful initiative rolling out. And so, really important for us to connect with members of our community around the values that we're talking about here. And you have lifted them up, Caroline: pluralism, open inquiry, free expression, constructive dialogue, trust. And so for all of us to recognize that those are the values reflected in this work, I mean, that is a real unifier. But also we wanted to really make connections with the strategic roadmap that our chancellor released a few years ago, because we want to talk about the fact that this is universally relevant work, even though clearly we see its connections to the inclusion and ethic of care work that we're doing. We also recognize that this is helping our faculty to innovate in the classroom, which connects with our pedagogical innovation goals. It's helping our staff and faculty to become better leaders, right? To evolve as professionals. So this is helping us with those goals. And as Jeremy mentioned earlier, this is preparing our students for career success after college. And so, we recognize that equipping students with these tools is going to help them thrive on teams and navigate, real life scenarios. So we figured that these are real anchors that give our campuses a clear principled starting point in the work as part of the system. The second thing I want to emphasize is that, we made a decision to really invest in people. We know that people are drivers of culture change. And so we wanted to make sure that members of our community, faculty, staff, and students have the tools they need. So I mentioned earlier, we've done certification for student-facing staff, leadership development for presidents and their senior leadership teams, workshops for faculty and student leaders. So we think of this as a distributed capacity model, right, where you've got stakeholders throughout the system who are engaged in the conversation and equipped with the skills to do this. We feel like ownership of the initiative is more authentic that way. It's not something that belongs in one space, but it's ultimately shared and lived by all. And then finally, I want to emphasize what I think is probably the most important thing that we're doing to ensure that this does not at all feel like a top-down initiative. We are co-creating local strategic plans with each college. So again, everyone is sending members of their community to trainings and ultimately going through some of the same exercises. But how are those who have been trained deployed on every campus? This is when campus ownership becomes real. So in consultation with my Office of Transformation and the Constructive Dialogue Institute, Caroline, your team, each of our colleges is articulating several things. First, we want them to diagnose themselves. In other words, they need to answer the question, what are the core pressures shaping your current environment? So, what's the thing that's really the thing you need to solve? Is it a campus climate concern? Is there a leadership transition underway where this can be helpful? Is there a particular community-based tension that you have in mind, a specific moment of strain, right, that requires thoughtful response? How can constructive dialogue help you to meet that? So that's the diagnosis piece. We also ask every college to think about their own stakeholders. So what are the insights you have about the specific motivations and dynamics of your campus community? What's truly going to resonate with students, faculty, and staff, governance bodies, union partners, right, student support teams? And then finally, we are asking every college to think about strategic integration. How can you anchor this work to an existing priority or a challenge already underway, ultimately demonstrating that this is a way to problem solve. This is a way to connect to needs that the community knows are there, right? And that we can do this work together. So, the leadership commitment is essential. But after the framework is ultimately provided, we co-create the strategy with the intention of our campuses ultimately experiencing this as shared work. We have shared purpose, shared design, and shared responsibility.
Thanks for outlining those three strategies, Rachel. Those were great. And what I loved about that third one is obviously it's applicable to other systems, but I think it also applies to universities because, again, often we hear from universities, how do we think about rolling this out across the different schools? Each school also has its own local context and local needs so that those same questions and that same process can be used even in a different context, like a university rather than a system. So thank you for sharing that. And Jeremy, returning to you, in your previous answer, you mentioned you introduced the debate across the curriculum initiative, which has become one of your the signature initiatives. And I'm curious if you could share, this connects back to, again, our pillar two around curriculum and pedagogy. So could you share a little bit about why you decided to really focus on this initiative in particular?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I guess I would start by saying the faculty member that is spearheading this is just passionate about using debate as a pedagogical tool. He was for 20 years the debate coach for our team and was very successful in that. He's a renowned scholar in communications and rhetoric. And the best part of all, he was president of our faculty senate. So he brought this tremendous um, reputation and respect on it. And I got excited about it. My history goes in debate as well, but he really carried the ball. And again, what debate across the curriculum is to introduce non-competitive debate in the classroom. It's not required. But because of his reputation, he is having tremendous success at getting faculty who are teaching first year seminar classes, mid undergraduate experience classes, and even senior seminars to open up their classroom for 3 days. That's a lot. That's a lot on a quarter system. And they come in on the first day to talk about the program of why this is an important topic, why we're trying to help change the needle on our ability to listen across differences. Then the students pick a topic. They are assigned to two different groups. They go off and do the research. On the second day, they come back and have this discussion and debate. They present their sides, and then there is a moderated kind of classroom Q&A, which I think really lends itself for dialogue. And then the final period is kind of a debrief. What did you learn? We've done over 200 debates so far with 3,000 students being impacted. There's another 80 more scheduled for this year, and another additional, 1,500 students. So we are having a wide impact with this program. Now, the great part of this program was I insisted on a really robust assessment process. Can we move the needle on how students view their reticence to engage in controversial topics, say? So we do a pre-test or pre-assessment and a post-assessment. And I'll just share some of the findings here. First of all, students have reported feeling more engaged with one another in their exploration of the course content, reporting a better understanding of the course content, especially in terms of applicability to contemporary events. So that's kind of a core outcome that we like to see. More importantly, though, we really are gathering evidence to indicate that the debate across the curriculum really does foster critical civic dispositions. The data substantiates that statistically significant increases in student openness, curiosity, which you mentioned, Caroline, and intellectual humility. So students are reporting increased tolerance for opposing views and more critical consideration of their own personal convictions. Um, I like this next one here where students participate even in a single debate report significantly less apprehension to speak their mind. We know that as a student enters into a classroom with fellow students that they may not know, especially in this day of social media, they are worried about how they come across, whether they'll be recorded, for example. But this has really helped them ease their mind about leaning in and speaking their mind. And finally, the last finding that is statistically significant is that students do report more empathy for advocates of positions that are different than their own, not the same, but different. And really, empathy is a key consideration in all of this. If we can enter into dialogue with a more empathetic approach, an intellectual humility, then we're more likely to exhibit the skills that we're looking for. I think this pedagogy has real merits and has something that can be replicated at other universities, and we're beginning to have more conversations with partners to see how it could be used in these kinds of ways. But I think this is to the five pillars, Caroline. Not only is it a curricular and kind of co-curricular tool, but it is also very measurable, and we're finding real progress in that regard.
Yeah, those results are phenomenal. It's really exciting to hear what strong effects you're seeing. So thank you for sharing that. Also, really exciting to hear that this is a program that you're hoping to scale to other institutions because I think it would be really valuable. So thank you. And Rachel, turning to you, would love to focus on pillar three around the co-curricular experience. And as you mentioned, CUNY is a system of 26 institutions, and not only is it 26 institutions, it's 26 extremely diverse institutional types. So you have community colleges, graduate and professional schools, traditional four-year colleges. And so I'm curious if you could share what promising practices you've seen across the different colleges for engaging students in dialogue outside of the classroom.
Yeah, thanks for this question. It's interesting, despite the fact that we have an incredibly diverse system, and of course, every campus has its own identity, it's rooted in its own community. The truth is we're seeing that some of the patterns of implementation are pretty consistent. And so, I think what I can say across the board is that colleges are gravitating towards strategies that are very practical, integrated into existing work, and ultimately responsive to real student needs. So there are a few themes that I thought I would highlight. The one is that some of the co-curricular dialogue activities are giving students a way in without super high pressure, emotionally charged things happening at the jump. A lot of times when people think about constructive dialogue, we recognize this is a tool to help us navigate really difficult conversations. But the truth is, these skills can be practiced in contexts that aren't fraught, right? And so, we're seeing that some campuses are thinking about how to let students dip their toes a little bit into dialogue and somewhat low stakes settings so that you're not having to deal with the emotionally charged topics at the start. And so, this might look like short facilitated conversations during club meetings or at orientation sessions, sometimes guided prompts or discussions used in residence life or student life events, some simulations or scenario-based discussions hosted by student leaders or trained staff. So, these activities aren't requiring that students are coming into something with a very strong point of view or opinion or expert knowledge, right? It's just offering a safe first step into talking across difference about any range of subjects. And we think this is helping students to build skills and confidence over time. Another thing we've seen in the co-curricular space is that, peer-led and staff-supported dialogue programming is a thing. And this is definitely strengthened by the investment we've made in faculty and staff training. First and foremost, we're trying to create opportunities for campuses to expand the number of people who can support constructive dialogue, right? We want more and more people to be trained and build fluency in the space. So we see that colleges are increasingly turning to their student leaders and their peer mentors, student government, as dialogue multipliers. And we're asking folks to think about weaving structured conversation practices into club life and orientation and leadership programs. And as I mentioned, what makes this approach particularly effective is that, we have growing training. And so the base of faculty, staff, and students who are able to engage in this way continues to grow. And we want to reinforce that this can be happening in our day-to-day relationships, the moments that shape campus life. It's not just a special events thing, but it happens, when we're in conference rooms, community spaces, classrooms, all the places. And I want to note that we're seeing staff from a range of offices, our SEEK programs, our academic departments, our advising units, career services, getting involved and creating a wider network of adults on campus who can help model and facilitate this. Bottom line is the more people across the community who hold these skills, the more likely students are going to encounter constructive dialogue principles anywhere and everywhere they turn. And then finally, just want to note something I've said a couple times already, which I think, it's clear why this is something that I'm emphasizing. Embedding dialogue into existing student-facing initiatives is really helpful. We don't have to create new things to make this happen. What does it look like to ultimately integrate constructive dialogue into efforts that we know already matter to students? Community building, belonging initiatives, restorative practices frameworks, identity-based programming, civic or advocacy-oriented student groups. There's so many ways to do this. It's not about creating a standalone program that's going to showcase the thing that we've all just learned, but it's figuring out how to pull this thing into the programs that we're running every day anyway. And that gets us to, CDI's guidance around integration into lots of structures. Okay, I'm almost done. The last thing I want to say is that we need to reinforce the norms that we are all learning through this work with visible cues and campus-wide messaging. So one of the really big things we want to do this year as we launch year 2 of our big initiative is to create more public-facing assets and to help the campuses with messaging campaigns around this. We want to put, and I saw in the Q&A that some folks were asking, well, what exactly are the constructive dialogue practices we're talking about here? We want to put those practices onto a wall that everyone in a conference room is going to see. so that when folks are engaging in conversation, we can collectively point to those principles of constructive dialogue and say, these are our shared expectations for one another. We want to flash some of the values around constructive dialogue on our digital screens on campuses, right? We want to have these assets available so this becomes a part of the conversation we're all having. And students and faculty and staff who have not been able to participate in the training yet can see some of these things, ask about it, become a part of the work. So, lots of ways we're trying to make this real in all of our spaces, especially the co-curricular ones.
That was great. Thank you, Rachel. And what I think is really interesting in hearing both of your responses is even though I asked you questions thinking that you would each focus on one pillar, you touched on multiple pillars in both of your responses. And one theme that you've mentioned in a few of your responses, Rachel, is around how do you embed this work into what you're already doing, what's already a priority, what people are already doing and enjoying. And so I'd say the same thing applies for the pillars, where rather than thinking of the pillars as five distinct things and needing to tackle each one separately, just recognizing that they also inform one another, they complement one another, they bleed into one another. And so thinking about that kind of porousness between them can also be helpful in thinking about this work. So thank you for sharing that. Um, we are running short on time and have so many wonderful questions from the audience. So I'll just open it up for Q&A and I'll start with a question. Either of you can feel free to answer first. So a question that came in was that many universities are facing budgetary challenges, and they're curious how you've implemented these initiatives, whether you've utilized operational funding, if you relied on philanthropy, if both played a role. Would love to hear from either of you or both of you.
Rachel, why don't you go ahead?
Sure, happy to do that. So we have definitely worked with some philanthropic partners to support the work, especially when we started piloting this a couple of years ago. And we're very, happy to have partners in the work. We've also turned to our partners in city government. We have support from the New York City Council. Um, so it's a combination of external partners at this point who have helped us to fund, and we are very actively pursuing new partners in the work as we grow and build. This is, as I mentioned earlier, a multi-year initiative. If you're going to do culture change across a community as large as ours and many, you need time. And so we need those partners who are going to provide, sustained support.
I'll simply add that philanthropy is the key driver for us. This, I'll tie it to back to leadership commitment pillar. We are blessed at the University of Denver to have an entire board of trustees, more than 30 trustees, completely committed to this idea of free expression and pluralism. We are particularly excited by one of the trustees who has made a significant gift to allow us to think big. And so we are intending to launch what we call a National Academy for Free Expression and Pluralism at the University of Denver. This will not just be focused on what we're doing at the University of Denver, but rather leverage one of the strengths of DU, which is to serve as a convener for this topic. Look, let's get all the great universities from CUNY to DU to Stanford to all over across the country to come together and start sharing best practices. Then let's invite our K through 12 friends and colleagues there and ask them how do they manage these same kind of issues, because those are the future students that are coming to the universities. And then finally, let's invite our corporate friends, because that's where our students end up going. And what are the issues that they're struggling with the change in generations of employees? So I would say philanthropy has really driven all of our activities, and I look forward to even greater opportunities in this space to really launch this National Academy.
Great, thank you both. And so another question, shifting to a different topic, but more around Pillar 2, curriculum and pedagogy, is Have you experienced pushback against your initiatives from faculty or certain factions within faculty? And if yes, how did you navigate the situation? If either of you want to respond to that one.
I'll lean in initially. Of course, there's pushback from time to time on various different initiatives, no matter what it is. And in this space, this is no different. Part of the pushback isn't so much that they disagree with the fundamental values of open inquiry and free expression and dialogue. It's just that they have certain learning outcomes that they have to address in their classes, and they just don't see how it can fit in naturally. You know, some of the natural sciences engineering classes are naturally going to be resistant to thinking about these kinds of topics. But I have seen considerable interest in the humanities in our freshman seminar or senior seminars as well. Those are just natural ones. I do think that, you know, the point that Rachel was emphasizing, investing in people and professional development for our faculty and for our staff is really, really, really critical. And so making sure that that through our teaching and learning office that they have access to information and resources that can help them facilitate these dialogues. And what happens when a conversation goes off the rails? How do you bring it all back together? It's really, really hard. It's really, really messy. But it does take place in the classroom in so many different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with so much of what Jeremy shared, and would just add that one of my fantasies is to actually build a faculty core. I mean, we've got faculty who have gone through training, but I think a kind of cross-campus core or fellowship where faculty are championing this work and really helping us to think more strategically about deeper integration in the classroom would be great. So that's definitely on my list, my wish list.
Sorry.
You're muted. There you
Yeah,
go.
thank you. We'll try to squeeze in one more question if we can, so we'll have brief responses. But one question that came up was if these initiatives aren't mandatory, how have you captured people's interest in these initiatives on your respective campuses?
I'm happy to jump in first. I think, I mean, Jeremy alluded to this. The members of our communities are so overwhelmed with the work that we're doing day in and day out. It's easy to feel crushed, sometimes by the number of initiatives that we're trying to pursue. And initiative fatigue is a real thing. But I think what we've tried to do, as I mentioned earlier, is ground this in the values. And it's so easy to do with this work. We want to build community. We want to make sure that we are all collectively navigating what I think everyone, is experiencing as a really difficult time in our history. And so, offering support, positioning this as something that is supportive, that is creating a framework for growth and community building has really gotten people to sign on in ways that have been helpful. This is really about more than our campus communities. This is about the lives that we're all living, right? I mean, these are skills I know that I've used outside of my professional life. It's skills that all of our faculty, staff, and students are using just to exist in the world. And so I think fundamentally, many of us are seeing that this is like a human thing that we all need and want, and that's a true advantage as we push this stuff out. Now, it's not just another thing that the university's trying to do. It means something to all of us.
I'll be real brief. I'll just simply say that what we have going for us in order to penetrate the curriculum, the co-curriculum, the faculty is the value of academic freedom. So we've talked about free expression, we talk about open inquiry, but at the end of the day, faculty revere, as I do too, academic freedom, the ability for them to explore topics in their research and to bring those topics into the classroom if that's their expertise. That is a principle and a value that is unwavering at universities and colleges across the country. It is under attack in our country right now, sadly. And therefore, a university that is committed to it, that is finding ways of undergirding it, I think helps win the hearts and minds of our staff and faculty in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you both for sharing. And Jeremy, Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your expertise with us. We really appreciate it. And thank you to everyone who joined. We will be sharing a recording of today's webinar via email, so keep an eye out for that. And if you're interested in learning more and exploring opportunities to work with us, feel free to reach out to growth@constructivedialogue.org. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you, Carolyn. Thank you
Thanks,
all.
everyone.